Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Paul Graney. President Trump is calling on the Justice Department to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's ties to a slew of prominent figures, and the White House announcing another trade deal. Obamacare premiums about to rise as COVID-era tax subsidies are set to expire in 2 months. Lawmakers now weighing how to address the issue, and President Trump proposing Trump Care. Congress has until the end of January to pass funding for the government or face another shutdown. Will lawmakers work in a bipartisan fashion to avoid another funding lapse? ICE is partnering with state and local partners to find hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied children who were smuggled into the United States and to make sure they are safe and not being exploited. A bankruptcy judge is set to approve a $7 billion deal with OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family to settle thousands of opioid-related lawsuits.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
It's great to have you here this Friday afternoon. President Trump is directing the Justice Department to probe Jeffrey Epstein's involvement with a number of high-profile figures, including former President Bill Clinton. And the White House announcing another trade deal, this one with Switzerland. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu, who's at the White House. Good afternoon, Mari. What's the latest from President Trump on the Epstein case?
Paul, good afternoon. Yes, today President Trump is announcing that he's directing the Department of Justice to launch a probe into Jeffrey Epstein's involvement with many prominent Democrats, including former President Bill Clinton. President Trump's Friday Truth Social post reads, quote, "Now that Democrats are using the Epstein hoax involving Democrats, not Republicans, to try and deflect from their disastrous shutdown and all of their other failures, I will be asking AG Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice, together with our great patriots at the FBI, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's involvement and relationship with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, JP Morgan Chase, and many other people and institutions to determine what was going on with them and him." President Trump's request is coming 2 days after the U.S. House Oversight Committee's Democratic members released a batch of previously unseen emails from Jeffrey Epstein's estate as part of an ongoing investigation into Epstein's sex trafficking network. President Trump's name is mentioned in some of these emails, private emails of Epstein's, but they do not accuse the president of abuse. The White House is calling this email release the newest development in what it calls the Epstein hoax, with Press Secretary Leavitt on Wednesday saying in the press briefing that it is no coincidence that the emails were leaked the morning of the government reopening after the longest government shutdown in history. Take a look.
This administration has done more with respect to transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein than any administration ever. And it just shows how this is truly a manufactured hoax by the Democrat Party. For now they're talking about it all of a sudden because President Trump is in the Oval Office. But when Joe Biden was sitting in there, the Democrats never brought this up. This wasn't an issue that they cared about because they actually don't care about the victims in these cases. This is another distraction campaign by the Democrat and the liberal media, and it's why I'm being asked questions about Epstein instead of the government reopening because of Republicans and President Trump.
And Attorney General Pam Bondi has responded to President Trump's directive and has asked U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jay Clayton, to take the lead in the Epstein investigations. And meanwhile, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer is announcing a new trade deal with Switzerland. Take a look.
Working with the Swiss, what we've done is we've identified the areas and the reasons why we have a big deficit with them in goods, and it really boils down to things like pharmaceuticals, gold, right, trade in gold, and a handful of other things. And so the Swiss, as part of their agreement, they've said we are going to have $200 billion in investment, during President Trump's term, starting with about $70 billion investment next year, and it will be in these areas.
The framework trade agreement includes the U.S. slashing its 39% tariff rate on Switzerland and reducing that to 15%. In exchange, Swiss companies will invest $200 billion in the U.S. by 2028, starting with $70 billion next year. This is coming as the White House announced yesterday that it struck framework trade deals with 4 Latin American countries, and as President Trump is planning to ramp up his domestic travel in anticipation of the 2026 midterms, where he plans to talk affordability with voters. Paul, back to you.
Mari Otso at the White House. A lot going on. Thank you, Mari. And the U.S. and South Korea have unveiled the framework of a new sweeping trade agreement, one that includes more than $350 billion in planned Korean investments across American shipbuilding and major industrial sectors.
Project selection will be completed by January 2029, when President Trump's term ends. The funds required for project implementation will be paid within 45 business days after receiving notification of the U.S. investment destination selection.
The announcement follows President Trump's October meeting with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, where the two leaders agreed to cut tariffs on Korean imports from 25% down to 15%. Officials say a new memorandum of understanding outlines dozens of potential projects, from shipyards to artificial intelligence and nuclear energy. The deal also opens the door for South Korea to build nuclear-powered submarines and expand fuel processing capabilities. Seoul will phase its cash investments over time to avoid disrupting currency markets. Seoul also pledging to raise defense spending to 3.5% of its GDP. It's becoming the first U.S. ally outside of NATO to meet the standard set by President Trump at the Hague summit. Tariff relief for the Swiss. The White House has released details on its new trade deal. Switzerland's reciprocal tariffs rate will be no higher than 15%. The same as the European Union.
This is a true relief for the Swiss and Geneva economy, which had been unduly damaged by punitive tariffs. So, again, a breath of fresh air for the Swiss economy.
The Swiss, as part of their agreement, they've said we are going to have $200 billion in investment, during President Trump's term, starting with about $70 billion investment next year. And it will be in these areas. So Roche, for example, sign of goodwill, has already broken ground on a new facility, pharmaceutical facilities.
The Trump administration has announced a framework on its trade deal with Switzerland and with Liechtenstein. It includes the removal of trade barriers and a pledge by both countries to invest at least $200 billion in the United States. At least a third of that investment will have to happen next year. In an interview, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer also said that Switzerland has agreed to buy Boeing planes. As for reciprocal tariffs, since August, rates have been at 39%, and this will be slashed to 15%. And the 2023 Georgia racketeering indictment case against President Trump and several others for alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election results will continue, now in the hands of a new prosecutor. The man responsible for finding a new prosecutor, Peter Skandalakis, assigned himself to the job. Skandalakis is the director of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia, a bipartisan group of legal experts from across the state. He's replacing Fonnie Williams, the Fulton County District Attorney, who started the case and was later disqualified for an improper relationship with the lead prosecutor. Skandalakis previously said he could also take the case himself if he could not find another prosecutor to take it on. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez breaks down for us the first items on the agenda for lawmakers.
We have been for maximum transparency of the Epstein files from the very beginning. What I was opposed to is the reckless disregard that was used in drafting the discharge petition. And we've been over this many times, but it was not drafted in such a way that it would adequately protect innocent victims.
The House of Representatives is set to vote on a bill that would force the Department of Justice to release all the files it has on the Jeffrey Epstein case. Republican leadership has rejected the bill as reckless.
And as soon as one or two break out from the White House pressure campaign and just say, to hell with the White House, this is the right thing to do, we call something like that a jailbreak, where I predict there will be over 100 Republicans.
Even if the bill passes the House of Representatives, there's little chance it would get 60 votes in the Senate. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are focused on reaching a solution for the ACA subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year.
The Affordable Care Act tax credits are scheduled to lapse on December 31st. And so we have about 45 days to get this done. House Democrats have introduced legislation to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years.
Republicans have rejected the idea of a clean extension of the health care subsidies, and Senate Democrats know it would have no chance of passing in the Senate.
I think people know that Democrats own Obamacare, and it's been a disaster. They promised you could keep your doctor. That didn't happen. They promised costs would go down. That didn't happen. Nobody's debating these things. It's just sort of they're trying to pin the tail on somebody else now, and American people are smart.
It's extraordinarily unlikely. It is, first of all, not attached to any must-pass legislation. The Republicans have all kinds of different ideas that they want to do on health care, so why are they going to sign on to our strategy for extending the tax credits?
Republicans plan on presenting a reconciliation bill solely focused on health care.
Reconciliation isn't perfect. We're not going to get any Democrats so far because, again, they're denying reality. They've just been papering over the failure of Obamacare, papering over the massive increase in subsidies, in premiums, by throwing subsidy dollars at us.
House and Senate Republicans are planning on passing the remaining 9 appropriation bills to fund government through fiscal year 2026 before the end of this year. If they fail, the odds of another government shutdown dramatically increases. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And millions of Americans are facing higher health insurance premiums. In 2 months, COVID-era tax subsidies for Obamacare are set to expire. Lawmakers now weighing how to address the higher costs. President Trump is proposing Trump Care. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more.
With a freshly reopened government, lawmakers have 2 months to find a path forward on health care. President Trump says he's committed to addressing the issue.
We want a healthcare system where we pay the money to the people instead of the insurance companies. And I tell you, we're going to be working on that very hard over the next short period of time.
COVID-era tax subsidies, which made Obamacare more affordable, will expire on January 1st.
I expect Republicans to be at the table in the next few weeks. I expect the White House to be at the table. And if they do choose not to come to the table, they can own the disastrous premium increases that will continue to rise.
Senators are expected to vote on an Obamacare extension in December. Bipartisan negotiations are underway.
We have senators, both Democrat and Republican, who are eager to get to work to address that crisis in a bipartisan way. These senators are not interested in political games. They're interested in finding real ways to address health care costs for American families.
While talks look more promising in the Senate, the House shows a stark contrast between the parties.
I'm not going to guarantee a vote on ACA unreformed COVID-era subsidies that is just a boondoggle to insurance companies and robs the taxpayer. We got a lot of work to do on that.
We'll introduce legislation to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years to make sure that tens of millions of Americans don't experience dramatically increased premiums, copays, and deductibles.
While some moderate Republicans are open to the extensions, many want to reform the program or replace Obamacare altogether.
The health care system broke under Obamacare. And as President Trump said, well, I'm not going to repeat his exact words for it, but it's not ideal. And we're going to have to work together to get this fixed because
President Trump is floating an idea he called Trump Care in a Fox News interview earlier this week. It would be health accounts for people to pay for medical issues.
Everybody's going to be happy. They're going to feel like entrepreneurs. They're actually able to go out and negotiate their own health insurance. And they can use it only for that reason. That's the beauty, only for that purpose. And if we did that, that would be so exciting. Call it Trump Care. Call it whatever you want to call it. But
Republicans have not yet unveiled concrete legislation. CMS Administrator Mehmet Oz said, "We have lots of great ideas, but I don't want to show our cards." Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
So the federal government is open, but some officials say it's not going to be easy to get everything back to normal. Some furloughed federal workers are returning to hefty to-do lists. Here's a look at some of the challenges they face as they try to catch up.
Some functions of the federal government are getting back online quickly post-shutdown. Others face impediments. The Agriculture Secretary says SNAP benefits should go out by Monday at the latest.
It's moving, it's coming, and for those who really depend on it, good news is on the way.
Officials say certain federal employees should start getting back pay today. Some agencies warn it could take another week to make their staffs whole. Meanwhile, the Smithsonian says it's opening its museums and zoo on a rolling basis starting today. The National Gallery says it'll be fully open by tomorrow. Conservationists say some national parks are dealing with litter and graffiti after operating with skeleton crews. As for air travel, the FAA continues to cut flights as air traffic controllers return to work. But Delta Airlines CEO sounds optimistic.
I think we'll be back a lot faster than people think. Thanksgiving is going to be a great holiday period of travel.
And Vice President J.D. Vance sat down with Sean Hannity and was asked about a potential 2028 presidential run. He said it's not the first thing on his mind right now, but here he is speaking with Fox News.
I really want us to win the midterms because if the Democrats get in power, they're going to try to screw up a lot of the great things the President of the United States has done over the past 10 months. Again, trees that have been planted, some of which won't even bear fruit for a few years. I don't want the Democrats to screw that up. So we're going to win the midterms. We're going to do everything that we can to win the midterms. And then after that, I'm going to sit down with the President of the United States and talk to him about it.
Vance was also asked if he sees Secretary of State Marco Rubio as a future rival for president in 2028. He said that's not something to think about right now, and instead described how close he and Rubio are, and said Rubio acted as a kind of mentor to him when they were in Congress together. Hannity and Vance discussed President Trump's energy and work ethic and how he expects his staff to keep up with him. Vance said Trump has an incredible ability to read people and predict what they might say about an issue.
Behind every headline in Washington, there's a story that could shape your future. With the Capitol Report, you get more than just the news. You get direct access to the White House and the Capitol. Every day, we bring you exclusive interviews with lawmakers, analysts, and experts, plus in-depth coverage of the decisions being made in Washington, D.C. Broadcasting live from the nation's capital, you witness events as they unfold, straight from the heart of Washington, keeping you connected, informed, and always a step ahead.
President Trump vowing to usher in a renaissance in American manufacturing. It's a big reason for his global tariff agenda. And recently, Ford Motor Company CEO Jim Farley thanked the president, saying the tariffs have leveled the playing field for American manufacturers. But just this week, Farley said he's struggling to find the people to fill the new jobs. He says Ford has 5,000 unfilled job openings that offer a six-figure salary. Joining us now to discuss is Nicole Walter, president of HM Manufacturing. Walter also sits on the board of the National Association of Manufacturing. Nicole, great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Nicole, you of all people have your finger on the pulse of American manufacturing. Is it really the case that one company alone is struggling to fill thousands of jobs with six-figure salaries? That's just incredible.
It's not just one, it's many. I can't tell you. We've been struggling since the COVID era. I know I'm not alone in that, and there's definitely other colleagues and other industries as well that are suffering to find skilled help.
Why, Nicole? Why?
Well, manufacturing is not a sexy job. So I would say since the early 80s, when a lot of those manufacturing jobs went overseas, that didn't help things. And in the early 2000s, that also became a big topic where more jobs were going overseas. So manufacturing became a way of the past. And so not everybody was wanting to get into manufacturing. People were nervous that if they did go into manufacturing, maybe they would be laid off. And so I still think from those times, we're really trying to get manufacturing somewhat back off the ground and making it cool again. And so, besides the fact that you do have automation and you do have robotics and there's a lot more engineers, you actually need machinists to be able to run these types of automation and products and technology. And so we're struggling. We're struggling to find that. We're struggling to get apprentices to want to be in that type of program. And I would say the other issue that we're facing is that because you can't find skilled help, you are having poaching, but the other offset of that too is you're seeing consolidation. So you're seeing other manufacturers purchase smaller businesses with already that skilled force so that they can grow and they can expand because you can't find it elsewhere.
I still find it incredible, six-figure salaries, Nicole, in this economy and in this environment. We know, to your point, Mike Rowe, he's famous for promoting what he calls dirty jobs, especially in the age of AI. Are there people coming to your company or other manufacturers looking for that change in career or a dirty job that they wouldn't have gone for before?
No, not yet. I mean, we're really trying. We go after the high schools a lot, and we're trying to make their manufacturing programs a little bit more robust in that high school level. We're actively working with your community colleges as well, but not everybody wants to do that, not even with six figures, just because it is a lot of work and it does require a lot of high skills. So when you can go on TikTok and you can get on that creator fund and it's super easy to swipe and scroll and get paid by that, you're seeing more and more people want to do that versus want to actually create a career in manufacturing. So I would say a lot of my industry friends were doing what we can to try to make it cool and popular, to almost like you can be a creator and be a TikTok star by showcasing the type of products you're making, but we're still not there yet.
Well, Nicole, I think you got to get out there and start making TikTok videos yourself. You can inspire a few people to come on board. But this is a big part. This seems like a big a challenge and hurdle for Trump's vision for American manufacturing. Are you confident that these problems will be solved and we'll see that manufacturing revival here in the States?
I'm going to say it's going to take a while. It's not going to happen overnight. It is costly to bring on new employees, to create a program where you have apprenticeships. I know he signed an executive order back in April about trying to get more people back into the manufacturing sphere, but it's not going to be a year or 2 year or 3 year ordeal. It's going to take 10, 15 years to try to get the momentum going. So besides having the funds available to be able to do that, we as manufacturers have to go out and promote it as much as we can. In the meantime, though, which is a little bit scary, is because we're not getting the people that want to come into these types of fields, we are having to do more and more automation. So we have been seeing more robotics. We have been seeing things where before you would need a person to, let's say, take a set screw out of a boring bar to be able to put it back into the machine. Now you're seeing automation where that is now a complete turn service, where you're seeing another robotic arm go into the machine and take that piece out where it would require a person. So we have to be very cognizant about not taking away all the jobs, but we're only limited to what we can. So if we're not getting the people in manufacturing, we do have to use this type of technology to keep manufacturing going. So it is one set of problems after another. So we're really hopeful. I think the tariffs, I know you were mentioning in the other segment, that's helpful. And we're seeing more and more reshoring and getting people excited about manufacturing. So here's hoping that that continues.
It's fascinating. Nicole, how is the Trump administration's immigration policy affecting American manufacturers?
I would say it's hurting it a little bit. It just depends on what side of manufacturing you're on. So if you're more on the food and beverage side, you're kind of getting hit a little bit of ag as well. We're in aerospace and defense, so not at all, just because you have to be a U.S. citizen to be able to produce those products, especially for the DOD. So it just really depends on where you lie in the manufacturing sector.
Interesting. Nicole Walter, HM Manufacturing. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. ICE has launched a new initiative to locate and verify the safety of unaccompanied children who've entered the United States. The Department of Homeland Security unveiled its new program called the Unaccompanied Children Safety Verification Initiative. The department says under the Biden administration, 450,000 unaccompanied children were illegally smuggled into the United States and were placed with unvetted sponsors or were lost. ICE has partnered with state and local law enforcement agencies to conduct welfare checks on these children to ensure they are safe and not being exploited. The Trump administration says so far it has found more than 24,000 of these children in person. The program began this week in Florida and will be rolled out to other partners across the country. We'll keep you updated. And a federal appeals court has put on hold the Transportation Department's new restrictions that would severely limit which immigrants can get commercial driver's licenses to drive a semi-trailer truck or bus. The court in the District of Columbia said the federal government didn't follow proper procedure in drafting the rule and failed to articulate a satisfactory explanation for how the rule would promote safety. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy announced the new rule in September after a truck driver not authorized to be in the United States made an illegal U-turn and caused a crash in Florida that killed 3 people. And another case of a federal judge squaring off against the Trump administration, a judge ruled yesterday that hundreds of illegal immigrants held by ICE in Illinois must be released on bond. District Judge Jeffrey Cummings issued the ruling in response to a lawsuit filed by the National Immigrant Justice Center and the American Civil Liberties Union. More than 3,000 illegal immigrants were arrested between June and October, and the ruling states that 615 of them were not subject to mandatory detention. The DHS argued that all of those detained fell under mandatory detention, but the judge rejected this argument. He ordered DHS to release all those not deemed a, quote, high public safety risk on a $1,500 bond by next week. Again, keep you updated. And from major takedowns to rewarding loyal employees, it was an eventful week for the Department of Homeland Security. NTD's Daniel Monahan has a closer look, including a sting that nabbed more than 150 alleged sex offenders.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem awarded checks to 24 TSA agents at Houston's George Bush Intercontinental Airport.
What I'm so proud of, though, today, and what I'm here talking about today, is the outstanding patriotism and service of our TSA officers and officials that stepped up every single day.
Noem says the payments recognize employees who went above and beyond while working without pay during the shutdown.
For stepping up, taking on extra shifts, for showing up each and every day, for serving the American people.
Secretary Noem said the department will continue awarding bonuses to TSA employees who showed exemplary performance. From the friendly skies to the criminal underworld, Noem also praised DHS law enforcement officers for what she called heroic arrests during the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Those arrested included Victor Manuel Mendoza Garcia, an illegal immigrant from Mexico, convicted of 3 counts of aggravated kidnapping and ransom in Cook County, Illinois, and William Giovanni Lopez Fuentes, an illegal immigrant from Guatemala, convicted of assault of a child in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, in a major bust, DHS announced the arrest of more than 150 sex offenders who are illegal immigrants. Noem commented on the operation during an interview on Fox News.
These individuals should have never been in our country to begin with. The fact that they were sexual deviants and perverts, and now we've gotten them off of our streets, it's remarkable, and we need to do more of it.
The operation targeted child predators, rapists, and violent offenders with convictions ranging from sexual assault of minors and child exploitation to rape and attempted homicide. In total, more than 230 criminal illegal immigrants were arrested. Noem didn't hide her feelings about those crimes.
This operation was called Operation Criminal Return. I call it Operation Dirtbag, because these individuals were sex offenders, but not just sex offenders, they targeted children.
And DHS also uncovered alleged crimes at the ballot box. The department released new voting records tied to Jose Ceballos Armendariz, a 54-year-old Mexican immigrant accused of voting illegally in multiple Kansas elections. He faces felony charges including 3 counts of voting without being qualified and 3 counts of election perjury. Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin says President Trump and Secretary Noem granted states access to the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements program, known as SAVE, to help confirm voter eligibility. McLaughlin says SAVE is a critical tool for state and local governments to safeguard election integrity. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says the U.S. is launching a new military operation targeting what he calls narco-terrorists in the Western Hemisphere. Hegseth announced Operation Southern Spear in a post on X yesterday, saying it follows an order from President Trump. The operation will be led by the new Joint Task Force Southern Spear, likely working alongside U.S. Southern Command. Hegseth did not outline immediate steps, but says the mission is meant to combat domestic threats in the United States. The rollout comes as the U.S. forces expand anti-drug operations in the region, including strikes on suspected smuggling vehicles. And the U.S. is dropping a plan to require passenger compensation for delayed flights. The Department of Transportation made the announcement earlier today. In December of last year, the Transportation Department under the Biden administration proposed the idea of mandatory compensations. Airlines would have had to pay up to $300 for domestic delays of at least 3 hours and almost $800 for longer delays. Today, though, the Department of Transportation announced the plan won't move forward, saying it would result in unnecessary regulatory burdens. Airlines in the U.S. must refund passengers for canceled flights, but are not required to compensate customers for delays. The European Union, Canada, Brazil, and Britain all have airline delay compensation rules, but no large U.S. airline currently guarantees cash compensation for significant flight disruption. Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. 4 European Antifa-linked organizations are now labeled as foreign terrorist organizations by the United States. Joining us now to discuss is Kyle Scheidler, Director and Senior Analyst for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism at the Center for Security Policy and the editor of Unmasking Antifa, 5 Perspectives on a Growing Threat. Kyle, great to have you on. Thanks so much. Why has the United States singled out these 4 European Antifa groups specifically?
Well, they are deliberately targeting groups that have a known track record of significant political violence. Antifa Ost is well known for attacking its political opponents with hammers. The Italian anarchist group has conducted a number of attacks, as have the 2 Greek groups. So these are groups that have Antifa links. They're known as anti-fascist groups, and they conduct attacks that meet that standard of terrorism. The advantage of doing this is they are helping establish the record that Antifa engages in terrorism, that they do so abroad. And this will then help them as they continue to pursue secondary sanctions.
Well, Kyle, attacking political opponents with hammers, shocking as it may be, what's the justification for grouping them with terrorist organizations like ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah?
Well, for purposes of our laws, what matters is not necessarily whether it's a bombing or a shooting or a hijacking. What matters is that it's violence intended to politically intimidate. And that is clearly the case here. So that is helping to establish that this is really what Antifa is all about. It is about using violence to intimidate for political purpose, and that is terrorism.
The U.S. has launched actual kinetic wars against terrorist groups. What actions are they likely to take here, though?
Well, this is certainly not a case where we're going to see drone strikes against Antifa members in Germany or anarchists in Italy or Greece. What we're talking about here is sanctions, and particularly targeting those organizations and networks, individuals who provide resources to these groups. So there's a large network that provides technologically sophisticated tools to Antifa groups, everything from encrypted email and phone apps to website hosting to blogs and the like. There's also very expansive networks that provide all manner of propaganda support, hosting communiques, providing information about tactics and techniques that Antifa groups can use to commit violence. So these are the kinds of groups and networks that will now become vulnerable to secondary sanctions now that we have some Antifa groups on the state terrorism designation list.
What connections do these groups or influence do these groups have over what's happening here in the United States, either with domestic Antifa groups or otherwise?
Well, they have a couple of different connections. One, there are examples of foreign Antifa members coming to the United States to conduct actions. There were foreign members of Antifa who were present, for example, in the Defend Atlanta Forest, Stop Cop City event. The state of Georgia has now charged some 60 people with domestic terrorism coming out of those riots and other violence. They also provide instructions and techniques for American Antifa members. A lot of what we see happen on the streets of the United States happened first in Europe, whether that's, for example, the targeting of Tesla dealerships and Tesla vehicles for fire bombings. That's a technique that was first originated by Antifa members targeting Elon Musk and his Tesla company in Europe. So a lot of what happens in Europe eventually finds its way to the United States. And again, as I said earlier, a lot of these groups share those same support structures. So the same blogs and networks that are hosting the communiques of some of these designated groups are also hosting the materials for U.S. Antifa groups as well. So there are those connections as well. And that's what the State Department is attempting to establish.
On that point, President Trump has floated the idea of using racketeering charges to go after left-wing organizations or left-wing groups that promote violence. Is there any connection between this latest designation and that idea of racketeering charges?
Well, a racketeering charge is a domestic criminal statute primarily aimed at organized crime. There are certainly activities that Antifa groups engage in that might meet that standard, particularly when it comes to the way money is moved, so money laundering issues, the abuse of charity fraud and tax-deductible donations. Those kinds of things would certainly open themselves up to a RICO statute, but it can be challenging. You know, RICO was designed to track money coming from lower-level criminal deals up to a kingpin at the top. And in this case, what you're talking about is money being pushed from the top to the bottom, which is a little bit more distributed and a little bit more difficult to follow. I think it can be done. There are some interesting efforts right now in Congress to make this a little bit easier on law enforcement. Senator Ted Cruz has his Stop Funders Act to include felony federal rioting amongst RICO charges, for example. So there are some interesting opportunities taking place.
Finally, Kyle, we know that the president has already designated Antifa as a domestic terrorist group here in the United States. Has anything significant come out of that yet?
Well, as I've had to explain to people, unfortunately, technically, there is no such thing as a domestic terrorist organization list. Designating an organization as a domestic terrorist organization does not actually confer any statutory authority. So federal law enforcement gained no new powers or capabilities because of the president's declaration. But what I think he was attempting to do by making that statement was to make clear to federal law enforcement that he views this as a national security priority and that he wants to see them use all available powers to address this threat.
It's quite the issue. Kyle Scheidler, appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the BBC has apologized to President Trump over a documentary that selectively edited a clip of his January 6, 2021 speech. The edit spliced together parts of the speech that were nearly 1 hour apart, giving the impression that Trump had called for violence. The documentary was aired in the run-up to the 2024 election. And while the BBC has now retracted the documentary and apologized, Trump's legal team is also calling for compensation, which the BBC is refusing to pay. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson brings us more on the story.
The British Broadcasting Corporation, or BBC, sent a personal apology to President Trump on Thursday, but said they believe there is no legal basis for Trump to sue the public broadcaster over a documentary Trump's lawyers called defamatory. The BBC edit created the false impression that Trump had called for violence ahead of the January 6th Capitol breach. Speaking to the BBC, British Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy said it is right the BBC apologised.
I am confident that they've already started the work to get not just the right processes in place to make sure this doesn't happen again and get consistency across the board, but also to get the right mix of experience at the top of the organisation to make sure that those high journalistic standards are well understood at the top of the organisation and are upheld.
Last Sunday, Trump's lawyers threatened to sue the BBC for damages of up to $1 billion unless it withdrew the documentary, apologised to the president, and compensated him for financial and reputational harm. The BBC said the splicing of the speech was a, quote, error of judgment. It has withdrawn the documentary and apologised, but is refusing to pay compensation, and is now waiting for Trump's response to their apology. The BBC's Panorama news programme ran a documentary where they spliced together two parts of Trump's speech on January 6, 2021. It aired just before the US presidential election in 2024. The edit changed the meaning of the speech, creating the impression Trump had explicitly called for violence.
They played the following clip.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
But here is what Trump really said.
Right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Trump said fight like hell 54 minutes later in a separate part of his speech, and in a different context. On Thursday, the Telegraph newspaper reported the BBC also doctored the same speech in a similar way in 2022, more than 2 years before the Panorama edit aired. Trump's legal team said this shows a pattern of defamation against Trump. Responding to the fresh claims, a BBC spokesperson said the BBC holds itself to the highest editorial standards and is now looking at the matter. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on Thursday said the BBC's edits are a clear example of fake news.
The president has made it very clear that this is a leftist propaganda machine that is unfortunately subsidized by British taxpayers, and he thinks that's extremely unfortunate for the great people of the United Kingdom and Great Britain.
The BBC has been thrown into its biggest crisis in decades amid allegations of bias, including on the edit of Trump's speech. The claims came to light because of a leaked report by a BBC standards official. 2 senior executives have since resigned. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, UK.
And 10 years ago today, France faced its deadliest terrorist attack. And in Paris yesterday, families, survivors, and officials gathered across the city to honor the 132 victims. The ceremonies revive memories of a night that reshaped the country. NTD international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
People behind me are lining up to attend a major commemoration at the City Hall. Families and relatives have been invited to the opening of a square dedicated to the memory of those who died. 132 people were killed in the attacks, making it the deadliest terrorist attacks ever to occur in the country.
The terrorists found people much braver than themselves. Paris stood firm. You stood firm. France stood firm.
La France a tenu.
This memorial garden will be a place where all the victims who lost their lives on November 13th will be identified. But it will also be a place where survivors can gather, a place for both walking and reflection. It will be a place where life is reborn each spring.
9 ISIS gunmen and suicide bombers struck within minutes of one another at several locations in the deadliest violence to strike France since World War II. They targeted fans at the Stade de France stadium and café-goers, and ending with a bloodbath in the Bataclan. More than 130 people were killed and over 140 were wounded. A decade later, the weight of that night remains deeply personal for many who call Paris home. Crowds gathered across the city, including at Republic Plaza, where Parisians were invited to lit candles, flowers, and handwritten notes throughout the week. Many French see these attacks as an assault on their way of life.
It's a way to pay tribute by going to the theater tonight. It's a way to keep living and thinking about all those people who, because they went to a show, because they went to see something on a terrace, left this world.
It's a wound that is still open.
For the last 10 years, we've been saying there was a before and an after. But what comes after? Have actions been taken to ensure it doesn't happen again? I'm not sure. The threat is still there.
As night fell, the Eiffel Tower lit up in blue, white and red, the colors of the French flag. Church bells rang across the capital as the ceremony began, including those of Notre Dame Cathedral. Emergency workers, city staff and volunteers took turns reading the full list of 132 recognized victims. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And a fast-moving wildfire in a California county near the Nevada border damaged 15 structures yesterday and forced people to evacuate. Part of a highway closed as firefighters battled the flames in strong winds. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection said the Pack Fire in Mono County grew to about 5.3 square miles last night and was burning without any containment. The rural county is located between the Sierra Nevada and Nevada state line. The fire started just before 12:30 p.m. and spread to more than 1,000 acres in less than 90 minutes. It was whipped up by gusts as strong as 50 miles per hour that temporarily grounded emergency aircraft. Part of Highway 395 was temporarily closed, and it was unclear whether any homes had been destroyed. By evening, the fire had slowed down because of rain in the area. The cause of the fire is now under investigation. And 2 Republican senators held a congressional field hearing in Pacific Palisades, California, listening to victims of the January 7th wildfire. The hearing, which focused on government response and insurance challenges, came nearly 10 months after the fire devastated the community. NTD's Christina Corona has more.
On Thursday, Senators Rick Scott and Ron Johnson led a field hearing in California on the aftermath of the Palisades fire. The January 7th blaze caused billions in property damage and claimed 12 lives.
I believe the Palisades fire was more than just a horrific tragedy. It was an unacceptable failure of government to protect the lives and property of its citizens. And we all know that this fire hurt our seniors more than anyone else.
Survivors and local leaders say their concerns have not yet been fully addressed.
On the day of the Pacific Palisades fire, reservoirs were empty. Fire hydrants went dry, and innocent people, including many vulnerable seniors, perished, while thousands more lost their homes, businesses, and everything they owned.
Lawmakers heard from residents and business owners to examine gaps in government response and preparedness. One resident said the fire department told him why they couldn't save his home.
John, we couldn't have saved your house or the block or the area. Our hydrants weren't working, and each truck holds 500 gallons of water. He said 500 gallons of water doesn't go very far.
He said guards and residents were using water from swimming pools, doing everything they could to put out sparks as the fire spread. Another resident said she never received alerts to evacuate. She stayed behind making calls through the night to help seniors and others at risk.
Seniors with mobility issues, those dependent on oxygen, residents with dementia who needed assistance. They all lost precious hours because of inadequate warnings.
Palisades resident Bruce Schwartz said State Farm dropped his insurance in October 2024. Just 76 days later, 17 of the 25 homes in his community burned down.
We were so severely underinsured that rebuilding required an affirmative vote of 75% of our homeowners.
He said the vote failed because some homeowners whose property survived refused to fund rebuilding for those who lost everything.
So now we have no home and no right even to rebuild one. To make matters worse, some of my neighbors will be forced to surrender their home to their lenders.
Other residents were dropped by their insurance after the fire.
Lots of residents found out after the fire that their policies had been dropped, and I was one of them.
Afterwards?
After the fire.
While nothing can undo the damage done by the Pacific Palisades fire, I am committed to advocating for the victims, their families, and this community to get answers and make sure this never happens anywhere in our great country ever again.
On Thursday, Los Angeles County announced they've launched an investigation into State Farm's handling of the Palisades and Eaton fire claims, focusing on potential violations of California's unfair competition law. This comes after complaints of delays, underpayments, and denied claims. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And State Farm responded to the investigation by Los Angeles County in a statement to the media. The company said it's there to help its customers recover, and it empathizes with those who are rebuilding their lives, adding, quote, "Our focus continues to be on supporting our customers in their recovery from the largest fire event we have ever experienced." At least 8 Ukrainian civilians are reported dead today, mostly in the capital city of Kyiv. Russia launched massive attacks across the country with the focus on the capital. Germany now wants to buy more American weapons for Ukraine to defend itself. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has more.
At least 6 civilians are reported dead in Ukraine's capital city, Kyiv, after heavy Russian attacks on Friday. Russia used 430 drones and 18 missiles in one of the biggest attacks on Kyiv since the start of the war. Ukraine says it responded with long-range strikes on Russia. A resident in Kyiv recounts the moment her apartment came under attack.
I didn't hear anything. I just realized that my hair was on fire. I started to put out my hair like this. Then I realized that I couldn't see anything.
Officials say that besides the 6 casualties in Kyiv, at least 34 people were injured, including 2 children and a pregnant woman. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says Russia hit civilian targets on purpose.
They want to break people's will, spread depression, and make people surrender. This is the only possible explanation for the attack on a peaceful city.
2 more civilians died in the south of Ukraine in an attack on a different city. Germany now wants to purchase more weapons from the United States and give them to Ukraine.
These are systems that are only produced in the United States and which Ukraine urgently needs. Prominent examples are the Patriot systems and the missiles for them.
Berlin is planning to provide over $150 million for such purchases from the US. After Friday's deadly attacks, Russia says it remains open for dialogue. A Kremlin spokesperson says Moscow still approves of a summit with the United States in Budapest.
We remain ready to hold a second Russian-American summit in Budapest if it truly builds on the well-developed results of meeting in Alaska.
And Russia publishes this video showing North Korean troops being active in Russia's Kursk region. Moscow says the North Korean soldiers are being used to clear the area of landmines. The soldiers previously already supported Russia in defending the Kursk region against a Ukrainian incursion. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
And the U.S. has approved a proposed $330 million sale of a fighter jet and aircraft parts deal to Taiwan, the first move since President Trump took office. The Pentagon says the sale will help Taiwan keep its F-16S and F-130S and other aircraft ready to meet current and future threats. Taipei thanked Washington, saying the deal continues the long-standing U.S. policy of providing Taiwan with the means to defend itself and deepens a security partnership it calls essential to stability in the Indo-Pacific. Taiwan's defense ministry says the parts deal will boost fighter readiness and strengthen air defenses. They will also help the island counter China's escalating, quote, gray zone incursions, the nearly daily pressure campaigns Beijing conducts around the island. China reacted angrily, repeating its claim that Taiwan is its territory and calling the issue the core of China's core interests. Meanwhile, Japan today repeating that its position on Taiwan remained unchanged. And Chinese online giants like Shein and Temu could soon take a hit from Europe. They'll face higher duties and low-value packages shipped from China to the EU. According to EU Trade Commissioner Marcos Sefcovic, it comes with concerns growing over Chinese goods being dumped in Europe. Here's the report.
Šefčovič proposed the so-called de minimis exemption should be removed in the first quarter of next year, 2 years earlier than planned. The de minimis rule means goods ordered online below €150 or $175 don't face customs duties. The likes of Shein and Temu could be hit as they send products from Chinese factories directly to shoppers. They also offer low prices due to the customs waiver. Šefčovič said in a letter European industries, particularly retailers, believe this distorts competition and de minimis should be stopped without delay. The European Commission proposed removing the exemption 2 years ago, but only from 2028. That's when a wider overhaul of the EU's customs regime is due to take effect. Shein declined to comment. Temu and others affected, including AliExpress and Amazon, didn't immediately respond to requests for comment. The number of low-value e-commerce packages arriving in the bloc doubled last year to 4.6 billion, with more than 90% coming from China. Thursday's proposal follows a similar move in the US earlier this year. Washington ended its own de minimis policy that allowed duty-free entry to parcels worth less than $800.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. John Nakamatsu was a high school German teacher before winning the Van Cliburn International Piano Competition in 1997. He says the most powerful performances are those that go beyond the notes on the page. He recently joined Bay Area innovators to share his unique experience of how music can create a connection that feels spiritual, sometimes even transformative. Let's take a listen.
It's been said that the sound of the piano can reach directly into someone's soul. What do you find most rewarding when you play yourself, or when you listen for that matter, but probably more when you play? What is the most rewarding element that you can think of?
If it's in a performance, I think it's when you really feel that there's kind of this two-way communication between the audience and the stage. That doesn't always happen. I mean, sometimes it can be going well, but there are really, really special evenings where you feel that the audience just is exactly where you are, where I am, you know, what, and that the journey kind of happens very much together. There are other performances where things go very well, and but you feel, well, you know, they're happy and I'm happy, but there's been
more flat.
It's more separate experiences. And also, when it goes really well with my colleagues, if I'm playing, you know, with other people on the stage, and there, again, a lot of those experiences are very positive and really it goes well and everybody's happy, but then some evenings where it really goes beyond that, and that's kind of the inexplicable of the arts. And I think almost everybody who goes to live performances in the theater, in dance, in anything, has felt that, you know, where a lot of what you go to is good. Yes. But then something you've heard is way beyond that, and you might not even be able to say what it is that moved you so much. But it's a combination of maybe the right music, the way it was performed, the dynamic of the hall, you know, your audience members, because it's a communal event. It's not, you're not alone there. So that whole energy, I think, is really real. That's why people go to live music, you know, whatever type of music. It exists in every type of performance. But, you know, in the classical world, it's in some ways more palpable because you have to invest a little bit more of yourself to really get into that, you know, deep level of connection. And whether or not you know anything about it, you can still feel that.
My best friend from elementary school back in Romania, he played piano all his life, and actually his parents kind of pushed him into it, but he ended up being one of the best in the country right now. But there's one thing he told me, he's not a religious person at all, but he told me that often when he plays, or sometimes when he composes, he feels this connection. It's almost like a divine connection to something else. It's not tangible, you know, it's almost like you said, you can't tell what it is. This is something you experience in some way, some connection with something beyond the tangible elements of music or piano.
I think that's one of the reasons why the passion for doing this doesn't end. There's something about being a part of creating this sound that is not just about the technical realization of the material or the understanding of the score. But when you play, music of Bach or Brahms or whatever it is, and you feel like this is way beyond what we are, that we're kind of the vessels through which this is being imparted, but that I can't really explain how it's affecting us, how it was created, and how it might affect other people. And that feeling is kind of an out-of-body, it's just beyond me. And in the greatest moments of inspiration, I feel that even when I'm not playing, often it's when I'm hearing other people play, and it's so magical that it has, I almost feel like it has to just occupy a different space in,
yes,
in the cosmos,
yes,
I guess.
Yes. Well, I can't help but remember Pavarotti's Nessun Dorma from the '94 concert that he had. At the last note, when he ends, it feels like he's somewhere else.
Yeah.
It feels like he's connecting with some other element that he's almost like an out-of-body experience, and then he comes back and he hears the applause, right? So.
Well, I think that's the reason why we do that as audience members, but also as performers. It's like, it cleanses us, it transports us, it takes us somewhere where we just aren't during the day. Our 99% of our lives are just spent kind of living life. But every so often, when you're kind of taken out of your own body in that way, it's hard to explain, but I think it's therapeutic. It makes us better.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. Police in Atlanta say a group of brave civilians saved the life of one of their officers. Last month, Atlanta police officer Malik Safai was responding to a call for backup when his patrol vehicle crashed and burst into flames. This police body cam video shows the residents in the area who sprung into action. They broke a window, pulled Officer Safai from the burning cruiser, and used his radio to call for help. Then they had to move the officer again when witnesses say his gun, which was inside the burning vehicle, started firing. The police department, in a Facebook post, thanked the residents involved for what it called their extraordinary courage. Well done. And London's Kew Gardens is getting ready to sparkle for the holiday season. An enchanting nighttime trail will bring the gardens to life with color, sound, and shimmering displays. Here's a closer look.
The display includes a light show on Temperate House, various light installations, a dance floor, and an orchestra made of lights illuminating the after-dark landscape of the gardens.
This year we've got 8 world-exclusive installations as part of the event. That includes bespoke things like the Palm House show behind me. We've put a bridge over the Palm House pond. We have an orchestra made of lights. We've got blooms blowing in the air. Mycelium networks reaching out from under tree trunks. I think one of the things I like about Christmas at Kew is that it has very gentle moments, like the one behind me, which is very contemplative, but there's also really fun and jazzy bits. So we've got a dance floor. We're encouraging people to dance along with giant headphones. But I think if I had to pick a favorite, the mycelium network is really beautiful. It kind of explores the network underground between mushrooms. Just feels so fitting at Kew, so the home of the fungarium.
Now in its 13th year, Christmas at Kew began as an initiative to attract guests at a traditionally quiet time for the gardens.
And what was once the quietest time of year at Kew is now one of the busiest. We have more than 300,000 people that are going to be coming over the next 49 nights to see this amazing show.
Christmas at Kew opens to the public today and runs until Sunday, January 4th, 2026.
Shenyun Performing Arts has dazzled audiences worldwide with the extraordinary skill and grace of its classical Chinese dancers. Now, for a limited time, viewers have a rare chance to see what makes the performances so breathtaking in a special Mid-Autumn Festival Technique Showcase premiering November 15th on the video platform Ganjing World. Here's an early look. Watch the exclusive premiere on November 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern on Ganjing World.